Hi, welcome to episode 6 of the ROB.GREEN podcast. And it's so great to be back. For the past 2 weeks, I've been all over the place. I've been running auditions for a show that I'm co-directing over in Liverpool and also getting things together for my next set of live dates, along with catching up with family and getting on with personal life. So it's been kind of nice to be away, but also a bit frustrating because I've been so eager to sit down and capture some of the things that have been going on and the changes and the growth that's happened in that time. So I guess I'm going to start from where I am with what I have. So here we go. Last weekend, when I would have normally have been recording an episode for this podcast, I was in Nottingham, part of a Hockley Hustle event over the weekend that was an industry style conference for artists of all different backgrounds around Nottingham, for promoters and managers, and to get together and share stories, get advice, be part of workshops that were happening over the weekend. I was very lucky to be brought in by the Hustle team to run a well-being workshop in the morning, chair a panel of radio producers giving advice to artists on how to get their music played on radio. And then in the afternoon, I got to do some one-to-one sessions, which artists would book onto and be able to talk to different people. And in my case, talk to me about their careers, where they were at, and get some advice. As an independent artist, one of the things that is quite hard to come by is opportunities to share what you know with other artists, but also to gain from other artists their knowledge and other indie artists on how they do stuff. So I was really excited that Hustle had made this part of the panel this year, because I just know how useful it is to sort of learn other people's approaches and how I'm always borrowing from other artists that I really respect and love. It was a really beautiful day, and it came at a really interesting time because I was in kind of the process of making a decision around how I was going to do my live shows at the end of the year, and just making a lot of decisions. And I think when you're making a lot of decisions, one after another, you do get decision fatigue. I think also I was having the classic artist struggle of balancing all of the different things that I do all at once. I do MD and arrange, and this year co-direct in theatre, and I love doing it. And it's so much fun, and I get to be really creative in that job, and it's such a great job. And alongside my singer-songwriter career has always felt like a really nice match, they inform each other. The skills I learn in one, I can use in the other. Really, really great. But I have to admit, there are times, especially when it gets quite admin heavy in the theatre world, that I start to kind of feel a little bit frustrated that I'm not also being able to commit all of the same equal energy to my songwriting. And that's nothing negative on theatre. I'm more just a representation of what it feels like to be spread across multiple things. But going into that Hustle weekend, the thing on my mind was, this is a really important space to be able to go into, even though I'm going there to host panels and contribute things and give things. Actually, I think I'm going to take a lot from just having space to talk about being an artist for a day and think about my own music. The day started with a well-being workshop, which weirdly was the thing I was that I was thinking quite highly of. I've been to a lot of workshops in my time that are filled with great advice, but not very practical, or sometimes feel like the kind of thing that would be great for you to implement if you had lots of time and space, but actually are hard to implement when you're sort of in the flow of things. So it was important to me to put a wellbeing workshop together that included some of the real skills and the real techniques that I genuinely use to manage my own well-being while I'm in the flow of the really busy stuff. And it was a really beautiful workshop, and everyone was so brave, because that kind of workshop, if people are a bit closed and reserved and not really open to exploring different techniques, it can be really hard work. And it wasn't that at all. It was really beautiful. So big love all the people who were in that workshop. The panel was really great as well, speaking to different radio DJs and producers about how to get your music played and what the background is. And although I was hosting the talk, I have to say I learned a lot. I learned a lot to bear in mind in coming up to the album. But the thing I really want to talk about is the one-to-one sessions. I had 3 one-to-one sessions, and each of the 3 artists that I met with, what was really beautiful and interesting about the 3 of them, they were all very different to each other, is that in one way or another, they represented some of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn up to this point in my career. It was like meeting the ghosts of Christmas past or something. It was really poetic. I won't name these artists because it was, private space and it's up to them to share whatever they want to share. But the first artist that I met with was a really passionate artist, and they'd set themselves the task of doing regular gigs almost every day, really, really regular gigs, just taking any gig and every gig that could come their way. And it really reminded me of me in 2017, me and my first manager, Greg, we just booked every gig that came our way. We did over 100 gigs in a single year, and we played everything. We played like the opening of an envelope. It was a real hustle. And it was incredible. It was such a great experience. It was tiring. I can't say that I would do it again like that, but it was phenomenal. And I built my fan base quite well during that year. And I learned so much. I became such a much better live performer. And in hearing this artist's passion and their excitement and their dedication, I'm smiling just thinking about it. It was so nice to sit opposite somebody who I could just see like the hunger and the joy and the hope of, what's next. And I could also feel their fear. There is a fear when we commit ourselves, I think, 100% to something, that it might be for naught, that it might not be worth it, or worse, that it might take off and be a huge success that we can't keep on top of and requires loads of our energy that we don't have. And so the sort of two-sidedness of that was really interesting to talk through, and I really recognized it. And it just really kind of reminded me of where I'm at in terms of trying to make this album happen. The second time I'm making an album that hopefully will be my first released album, alongside balancing all the other stuff that I'm trying to do really well. So I loved that. The second artist that I met, they were balancing something really interesting where they had a big artistic vision, a huge artistic vision for what they were doing, visual, conceptual, and they'd already started sort of dipping their toe in that stuff, but they were really envisioning something big. And they had the process to do it, and they had the ability to do it. They were multi-talented. They were building their videos and designing their outfits and styling their shows and putting choreo together and doing all this stuff. And they just had, again, a hunger and an excitement, but also kind of just a real artistic concern that just really resonated with me. Again, speaking so much to what I'm trying to do with this album. And I loved the situation that we were in where this person was saying to me, basically, I have this big artistic vision, essentially, she was worried that the challenge of the artistic vision might be all consuming, but also that she might not be able to get the right people in to help, or whether she should get the right people to help or she should do it on her own. I just recognized all of the challenges of that. And it reminded me again of the Manhood EP. I mean, the Manhood EP was something that I wrote with Tom Pendergrass, but I executive produced the visual EP. I styled it. I worked with the videographer to build a shoot plan. I put all the logistics together. I booked everyone's hotels. I was doing everything, and the vision was huge for the Manhood EP, and the budget was not. So it was amazing to make, and it was really nice to talk through their, this artist project and how they were doing things. So it was just really energizing to remember what it feels like to throw yourself fully into the artwork. And finally, my third ghost of Christmas past was an artist who was just as early in their journey as the other 2 artists, but potentially a little bit older. I think they might have been a similar age to me. They had a bunch of process that had started and ended. They had recorded singles, or they'd recorded some stuff and got into the flow with a certain creative dynamic, and then those creatives kind of fell off the radar, and then they had to put together a new team, and then that setup didn't quite work out. And then they had their children, and so they had to kind of focus on being a parent for a little bit before they could also incorporate their artistry into their day-to-day again. And this artist quite clearly was somebody who just loves music and wants to perform and wants to create, and has every right to. But what was interesting was watching them question and sort of wrestle with their right to exist. And this was a big one. This was like the final artist I was meeting that day. And it stuck with me because, again, I recognize it. I've talked before about the sell-by date of being an artist, that we get told essentially in one way or another, sometimes directly. I was told this directly, that by 26, if you haven't had a chart hit and you haven't been signed, it's never going to happen for you. I don't just mean you won't get signed, but you won't be successful. And although there are many, many artists that prove this is not true, and more every single day now that we're in a sort of post-label industry, the reality is that the ghost of that lie exists and it does its damage. And I was sat opposite this artist whose heart is clearly pure, whose talent is clearly evident. They'd had their music playlisted on BBC Introducing, and they were being actively asked for more music by people. And what I thought was interesting is that even when they were being asked for more music, even when clearly their music was being well received, the question kept arising, who am I to do this? And again, anybody who's been listening to the podcast from the beginning will know that's been a big one for me too. Every single one of the one-to-one sessions that I did, I really felt great about being able to talk about these three big themes. But it also did a beautiful thing in bringing me back to the middle, as India Arie would say. I think as the weather's been changing, as the year has been going on, as my schedule has been settling down and the year is looking more and more clearly mapped out in terms of how I'm getting this album done and my other creative projects lining up, I can feel the fire stoking. I was very aware going into that industry weekend how many obstacles I was going to potentially be facing. And let's be clear, some of them are obstacles I've faced before. And going back to face or deal with something that you have dealt with in the past that might have been quite challenging, it's no less daunting. And you do question, I have to say, whether you've got the energy. Not to make the thing, but just like when this obstacle inevitably comes up, will I have the strength? And of course, there's only one way to really find out. The thing that brought it all home, though, was I met up with a good friend of mine, Samaya. She is a BBC radio presenter and just one of the most fiery, committed people that I know. She's super fast, way faster than me intellectually. And one of those people who, when you walk away from speaking to them, you feel a little bit smarter and a little bit more ready for the world. If you haven't got a person like that in your life, get one. It's so worth it. Samaya was talking. We talked about many things when we were together, but something that I'd love to share is she was talking about potentially working on a huge project. And in her journalism career so far, she has done some huge, huge projects that have been quite demanding. And as she was weighing up what could potentially be her new project, she was saying very similar things about, I know how much it took for me to do a project of that size the first time. I don't know if I've got it in me to do a project of that size again. But as she was talking, I was realizing something for her that I knew was also true for me, which might be true for all of us, is that you'll never be doing it the first time ever again. The amount of energy that it takes to get the ball rolling from a complete standstill, the amount of energy that it takes to handle all of the complete unexpectedness and uncharted territory of what lies before you is only that demanding the first time. The next time you go to do those big things, it's still demanding and it's still challenging, but it's in different ways. It doesn't drain to the same level that it did the first time. And the obstacles are not the same. It's worth going into it with the belief that it will be a brand new experience than it probably is to go in there thinking, I've done this before, I'm just going to change a few things. It brought me back to focus on a few personal things. I know I'm not the only person who might have gained a little bit of weight since Christmas, might have fallen off the radar with some of their really good routines or habits that help them out mentally, physically, spiritually. But after last week, starting it on the Sunday with a well-being session, sharing advice and gaining knowledge, spending my week recording and singing, along with meeting some of my closest friends while I was in Nottingham, I just found that it really recharged me. That at times I perhaps haven't made time to really socialize and see my friends, just on a low stakes thing. But the energy I'm coming into this week with, I really feel recharged. I don't necessarily think I'll be gunning into my life the same way I did in 2017, taking every single gig, doing 100 gigs in a year. But that's the point, is that it's about growing, working smarter, not necessarily harder, and being true to what is artistically exciting and not letting something like age or finance or geography or timing be the reason why you compromise on what really resonates. Wondering if there's anything else to say. I think the other thing that's on my mind is there's a couple of pieces of art that have really come to the fore since Friday. The first is that Raye's album, her second album, came out, and I was driving back from Nottingham listening to it. And it's so good. Have you heard it? Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so good. Oh, days. What an album. Like, such a rich offering. It's like the most if it was food, it would be like gourmet. Like Hans Zimmer on the orchestration. She's executive produced the thing herself. Like, and you can tell that an artist was at the helm the whole time. It is so enjoyable, so rich, it just goes through so many motions, seasons as she's created the structure. It's just like, I loved it. And so, yeah, if you haven't listened yet, go and listen to This Music May Contain Hope by Raye, because it's so phenomenal. But that album, good, rich, artistic albums, they just make you want to step into your artistry in a big way. For me, anyway, I'm like, yeah, man, let's make this album. I'm not saying it's going to be Hans Zimmer Raye level, but it's going to be, it's going to be my version of that. Just wholehearted. And it's just energized me so much to listen to that album. And the other thing that's happened this weekend is that, as you may know, one of the biggest artists of my life, an artist that I love dearly for so many reasons, is India Arie. And it is the 25th anniversary of her first ever album, Acoustic Soul. Acoustic Soul is potentially one of the most famous albums that she's made, certainly in terms of its popularity here in the UK. It features some of her biggest hits like Brown Skin, Video, Promises, Back to the Middle, Nature, Simple, Strength, Courage and Wisdom. It's a banger. The album is just fantastic. And so I've been listening to that album and some of her other albums over this weekend. Her message as an artist is something that I really, really love, and is pretty consistent through all of the albums that she's made, and she's made quite a few by now. But she speaks a lot about evolution, about growth. And what I also love is that she's very truthful. I think that was a nice binding thing between Raye's album and in listening back to Acoustic Soul, is that there's two artists there, two different generations of artists, two different genres of artists, potentially being so truthful and creative and artistically truthful with just their day-to-day experiences and their everyday life, finding the real art in it and the truth in it, and presenting it in a way that just moves you. So I've been listening to Acoustic Soul, and This Music May Contain Hope. And I'm coming into this week, I have to say, kind of excited. I can feel that there's a wave of serious creativity coming. It's like in the water. And I think that's been fueled by diving into and reading and listening into a lot of great creativity and connecting with really uplifting, energizing people who are being brave creatively and conceptually in the same ways. Like-minded people basically doing like-minded things. So I haven't really made this a rule, but I've been kind of ending these podcasts with a little something from the good book. And just before I started recording today, I had a little flip through the good book and I opened it on a page. Absolute fluke. I've put a bookmark in it now, but I flipped onto this page and I was like, oh, I'm going to read some stuff from this page because it all lined up with everything I was thinking about when I sat down to press record. So I'm going to share some of them with you and hopefully you can carry them through the week the same way I'm going to be. The first one is Stormzy quoted in The Sum of It All, which is the documentary about Ed Sheeran. And he says, you've really got to say, yo, this is what I want to achieve and just go that full run of it. Love that one. Big. The other person on this page, Taylor Swift, says, when you make a goal like that, you just have to make a choice and decide there's no going back on that choice. A big lesson in being wholehearted. That's from End of an Era, episode 1, 7 minutes, 37 seconds in, if you want to go and find it. And the final quote on this page that really just brought it all home is from Ryan Holiday's book, Courage is Calling. It's on page 94, and it goes, the kind of person who goes their own way, who refuses to accept defeat, who believes faithfully in their own agency, who is brave enough to assert their autonomy even at the risk of death or dissolution, is not the kind of person who's easy to boss around or forced to compromise. That entire book is nice to be remembering in this moment because it's called Courage is Calling, and it's really about bravery. This quote, which talks about agency, talks about betting on yourself 100% and throwing yourself wholeheartedly into what you believe and what you want to achieve. It's a nice energy to go into the week with, I think. And it brings me back to one of the quotes that I talked about in my one-to-ones, a quote that I memorized a long time ago by Ralph Marston. The only thing standing in your way is the thought that something is standing in your way. It's a big one for me because I can sometimes kind of artificially create the idea that there's obstacles, because it's a bit easier to imagine there's an obstacle than it is to throw yourself into the scenario where you're genuinely going to come up against them. You have to get out your own way, basically. So with all that said, it's great to be back. I hope you've had a great time since I last saw you. Sending you loads of love for this week. And I'll see you next time. Bye.